Alright, what's up nerds? This is Cam. Today I'm going to keep working on that rifle system that I started creating using Mixins. Right now, uh, if I delete that and play my scene, I have my rifle shooting every half second. It prints I hit wall, so we know everything's working fine. Today I'm just going to plug a few random behaviors in that you're going to want some weapons to have, and then it'll just show you how anything you want any of your weapons to do. It's really easy to just plug into this system. The first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to change the way call mixin actions works. And if you remember what this class does is it has a list of check mixins, and if the check function on every one of those mixins returns true, it calls the action function on every action mixin it has. But it should be a mixin as well, so then you can plug it into the modular system. So we're going to make this a mixin base here, and everything else is going to work the same, except instead of call actions here, we're going to have our check function. I swore I hit check there, but this should be bool check. Okay, and then our check function is going to return false if any of our mixins return false, and otherwise it's going to return true. And then if our check function returns true here, we can call our action function. And our action function is just going to do the same thing as it did before, which is going to call all of our action mixins. So this should work exactly the same if we get rid of all the errors. Oh yeah, so our player controller has to work a little differently. So what we're going to do is we can get rid of call mixin actions here and give it a mixin base. So then you can plug anything in there that you want to happen when fire 1 gets pressed or whatever. And then we can change this to check and say if our check returns true. Jeez, I'm all over the place with typing here. If our check returns true, then call our action fire weapon dot action. And I know this isn't the most modular player controller you've ever seen, but I'm trying to focus on the weapon system here. Maybe I'll come back and do a better player controller later. And that should go away, and this should all work the exact same. Beautiful. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm gonna start by making this rifle look a little nicer. I mean, it's still going to be programmer art, so it's not going to look that nice, but it's going to set up the framework for someone who can make this look nicer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop onto here and create a folder. I'm going to call it animators because organization is important, and I'm going to create an animator controller, and I'm going to call it rifle animator. Nice. And then on my mesh here, I'm going to give this rifle animator, and then I'm going to open up my animation window. So I'm going to go window animation, and perfect. So if I click on my mesh, I can click create, and I can call this fire rifle anim, and it's going to create this animation automatically for me. And then I can step a second in. First, remember to click this little lock button, top right corner of the animator. It'll lock it to animating the mesh exclusively. So then I can click on this cube and I can move it up and rotate it. And then it gives me these keyframes, which is a nice little kickback animation here. And then I can copy these 3 keyframes and put them into 0.2. And there, we have a nice little fire animation for our rifle here. And it should have put it right into our animator, which is super convenient. So I'm going to create an empty state in the animator and make a transition to fire and set the empty state to be our default state. And I'll just call this like idle, and that's fine. And then we're going to give it a trigger and we'll call the trigger fire, and we'll give it a condition of fire with no exit time and no transition time because idle is empty. And same deal over here. Actually, this is going to have an exit time, but the exit time will be at the very end of the animation, and it's going to have no transition, which will be fine. So there you go. That should be all set up properly. The only thing left to do here is I made my animation 20 milliseconds here, so I can pop on to check cooldown, and I'll just make this 0.2, and then it'll line up properly with our time. But first I have to actually trigger that animation, so I'm going to write a little mix in here, and we'll call it trigger animator. And there we go. So this is going to be super simple. We're going to give it an animator, animator, and we're going to give it a trigger, string, a trigger, which is a string, and then we'll call this a mixin base, and we'll give it an overridable action function. And all action is going to do is set the trigger of the animator with our trigger. And that's all you need there. And when this pops up here, we're going to drag a reference to our mesh, and our trigger is going to be fire, which is the trigger that we made just a second ago. And then we can drag trigger animator into our action mixins function. And just like that, there we have an animating rifle. It looks gorgeous. Maybe I'll change professions here and become an animator. But before that, I'll try my hand at UI. So let's pop into the mesh, and we'll make a UI canvas. And it's massive and in a screen overlay right now. So what we're going to do is set it to world space so we can position it in 3D here. So we're changing the canvas to world space mode, and we're going to make it way smaller. And you don't want to just scale it down because you'll lose the resolution. So let's put the resolution at like 200 and 200 here. And we'll make the position 0, 0, 0, so it's right on my rifle. And then we can scale it down from there. So where is this guy? Oh, it's still huge, eh? Let's go with 100 and 100. And then we can scale it way, way down and focus in on it. Okay, sweet. So if we grab it like this and we give it a UI panel, so it has a little background here, and then we'll give the panel a UI text, and this can give our gun a little UI readout on the gun, but you could use this exact same logic to do like a heads-up display if you want to display any of this information at the bottom there. So with our text, we're gonna change its anchor point to stretch and its pivot point to the middle, which is nice because then we can just set zeros across the board here, zeros across the board, and then it stretches to fit the exact size of our panel. And then if you change the font alignment here to center and center, you get text right in the middle of the panel there, which looks nice. And then we can up the font a bit and put 0, 0, because what this is going to display is our rifle's ammo, or I mean whatever float data you want in the whole game, you can just throw in here. But what we can do is pop into our fire logic, and we're going to make a new mix in here, and we're going to call it, let's call it update UI text. And update UI text is also going to be really simple. Once you have the framework for these mixins, it's really easy to make new ones and have them do really whatever you need at the time. So we're going to make a public text. Oh, yeah, so you need to include using UI here, but a handy tip is if you kind of hover over the thing you want to include, you can click Control period, and then using Unity UI pops up as one of the options here, which is nice, and then it automatically includes it for you. So we'll do public text, and then public float data, and we'll call this data. And then all we have to do in our action is say text dot text. Oh yeah. Text dot text equals data dot data. That's funny. Oh, it's actually, you know what? It's get data, so that's fine. That looks fine. Oh yeah, and get data is a string, so we'll do toString here. Or sorry, we need get data to be a string. A thing you could do here if you want is create like a database class for all of your different data types, and then you can have an overridable function that's called like get data string. And then for your different data types, if you had a string data type, an int data type, a float data type, they could all have a function that returns the string, and then your update UI text would just have a public database data, and then that would work for any data type in your whole game for displaying that information in a UI text element, which would be nice, but I'm trying to keep these videos a little short, so I'm doing it the quick and dirty way here. And I mean, that's all you need. It's that easy. So now we have our update UI text. We can drag our text element in here, and we can drag our float data in here, and then we can call that from check clip here. We can make it a, oh, it's already a mixin actionable because, oh, it calls the reload function for that. So, but you know what, that wouldn't work anyways, because then it wouldn't update when it actually does reload. But you know, okay, here's what we can do. We'll probably want to do this anyways. Is we can have like a, yeah, so our data field can have a mixin base, and we'll call this update mixin. And then we can give this a function here on updated or whatever, and this will call our update mixin action. And we should probably check it. Okay, so then we can say on increment we'll call on updated, and then same with when set data is called. So then anytime our float data changes, we'll call on updated, which will call the action mixin here, and then on our float data we can do update UI text in here. And as your system's getting more complicated, you could probably make all these like action mixin responses lists of action mixin responses that get iterated through. So when your ammo gets updated, you could call a list of actionable mixins, and it would work very similar to call action mixins. Actually, what you could do is give your float data a call action mixin, and then call any number of mixins you want from there without changing anything that we have right here. That's down to personal preference. That's just design like philosophy. That's whatever you want. But hopefully, if that works, yeah, look at that. We have a little ammo counter. So we get down to 0, and there you go. That's perfect. So let's do what else did I have here? Oh yeah, let's do like a UI slider here. So we got to make that first. So let's duplicate our panel, and we'll chop the rotation out of it, and we'll chop the text out of it, and we can rotate it here 90, and we'll put it on the side of our weapon here, make it look nice. And we can probably ditch the panel, and we'll give it a UI image, and we'll call its height. Oh, what? Oh, I was moving the panel. God damn it. Okay, so we'll rotate the canvas. You want to move the canvas around, not the panel itself. There we go, right on the side of the gun there. And we'll change our image, give it a height of 25, looks nice, 20, and a width of 200. And we're moving the canvas. There we go. So we can call this image background, and we can duplicate it out and call this foreground, and we'll make foreground kind of green. Actually, I'm going to combine this with something else, so let's make it red. Let's make it bad. Okay, so then that's set up for now, so we'll do something else actually to start with. So let's make our gun overheatable. Say you don't want it to reload, you want it to overheat if you fire too much in a row, but say it's got unlimited ammo, but you have to limit like how many bullets in a row you fire, which is how a lot of guns work. So we'll call this check overheat, and then we can pop this up. And overheat is going to need a lot of parameters, so we'll call this public float step, which is going to be how much it increases your overheat buffer every time you fire. So then we're going to need a public float data that's going to be our overheat buffer, and then we're going to need a public float overheated timer, which is going to be how long the gun can't be fired for after you overheat, and a public float like decrease amount, which is going to be how much the overheat buffer decreases over time while it's not being fired. So then we're going to need a bool is overheated, and we're going to need a float overheat time, and we're going to need a public float let's call it decrease timer, so how quickly is it going to decrease, and then a float decrease time, and I want to say that's it, but we'll play this by ear, and we're going to make it a mixin base. So we'll do public override action, and action is going to do overheat buffer, and we can increment it by the step. So every time we fire, the overheat buffer is going to be incremented by step. And then on update, which does not need to be public, we can say if it is overheated, we're going to increment the overheat time. I really need to write a timer class or something, because I find myself rewriting these timer lines of code in many of these mixins, but it's fine for now. I don't know why I'm doing a for loop. I gotta stop talking and coding. What I'm trying to say is, if my overheat time is greater than my overheat timer, then is overheated is equal to false. And then we can always, even if it's overheated, we still want our buffer to decrease over time. So we can say if, I guess we'll increment this, our decrease time plus equals time.delta time, and if decrease time, here I am writing these 4 lines of code again, is greater than decrease timer, then we can say we can copy this here, increment data, and we'll increment it by the negative decrease amount. And there we go. So we have to set is overheated. So we can do that here. So if overheat buffer. Okay, so what we need is a max, like a threshold to hit, and when we hit that, we're overheated. But I don't want to do that here, because I did that. I think most of our float datas are going to need a max, so we could probably put it in right here. You could make different data types that have maxes and don't have maxes, but like our clip and our, overheat buffer both need a max, so I think it's fine to do this. So we can do copy our get data, and we'll do get data max, and we'll return data max or max data. And there you have it. So that should be fine. So then in check overheat, we can say, let's actually just, no, it's fine. If overheat buffer dot get data is greater than or equal to overheat buffer dot get data max, then is overheated equals true. And I think that's all good. Actually, let's set these to equal 0.0. So we'll reset the timers once they're done. Overheat time equals 0.0. And there you have it. I'm pretty sure our gun is going to be overheatable now. So if we go into check overheat, we can say our overheat buffer is a new float data. So let's pop this up to the top, and we'll say our gun overheats when it hits 10 and it starts at 0. And update mixin is going to be nothing right now, which is actually going to be a problem. We want to have checks here. I should have had this everywhere, but you want to check if your update mixin is null before you try to call it. Otherwise, you're going to get a null reference error here, which is no good. We're already at 24 minutes. Jeez. Okay, so my overheat buffer is my float data. No, data max right here. So I'll pull this in here. My overheated timer, so I'm not going to be able to shoot for, let's say, 4 seconds after I overheat. The decrease timer is going to be like 0.5. Actually, let's make that even shorter. Let's do 0.2, but we're only decreased by 0.2, so it'll come down a little more smoothly. And then the step will be 1, so I'll add 1 to the buffer every time I shoot. So hopefully if that works. Where's my float data here? Oh, nope. That's not going to work. Let's go into our overheat. Check overheat, and this is decreasing even if the overheat buffer is at 0, which is no good. So we're going to say if overheat buffer get data is above 0. Let's actually put this in our action mixins, and then this should be fine. So yeah, so now it's increasing, and when we, oh, you know what? I need more bullets in my clip here. Let's make this 50. See, and then now I have to change initial clip size, which is no good. So we would change that to get data max, and we could set our clip size at 50. So it's a better way of doing it, definitely. So here we go. We can. My data is way above my max data here. What is going on? Oh, we have no check here. That's the problem. Public override bool check. And then we're gonna say return not is overheated. Because if is overheated is false, we don't want this. Or if is overheated is true, we don't want this to be able to run. So we can pop in here and push our check overheat into our check here. And now our float data. See, we can't fire because it's overheated. So we hit 10 here, we can't fire for 4 seconds, which is really nice. So you could take the reload like mixin and check clip mixin like right out of here if you wanted to have unlimited ammo. Or you can combine them and have a gun that can overheat and reload. Like I keep saying, it's super modular. So then like what you could do here is just super easily in our update UI text here, just give it our new float data, and then this is gonna go up as you. And I mean it's not very nice looking, but it works fine. But let's get rid of that. We're gonna write a slider here, so we're gonna make it look a little nicer for like an overheat function. So let's do update UI slider. I'm almost done, I promise. And then for update UI slider, it's gonna be a mixin base. Instead of taking a text element, we're gonna take a rect transform. And a float data. And then the overheat is changing over time because of the decrease amount. So we're not going to run this in an action function. We're going to run it in an update, which is fine. We're still calling it a mixin because then we can call it from things like check mixin actions, but it doesn't really have any mixin-y overridden functions here, but that's totally fine. So on start, I don't really think we need to do anything. So yeah, that's fine. So what we're going to say is rect transform, or no, we're going to say slider foreground dot size delta x is going to equal a new vector 2, which is a bit of math here. So we're going to do data dot get data to get what our data is at, and we're going to divide it by our data dot get data max to get a percentage there, and then we're going to times that by our, oh yeah, that's what we need. We need a width here. So we're going to do a public float max width. So we do need a start function here. So we'll do public, not public, void start max width equals, and it's going to be this. So whatever it starts as, the slider foreground dot size delta. And this is not going to be dot x. This is actually that here. And then, so we're going to do that times the max width. So whatever percentage we are, so we're 50% of the way to our data max, we're going to set the slider to 50% of its original width. And that'll look nice there. And then for the vector 2, we're just going to do slider foreground dot size delta dot y. So then the height will never change. And that's it right there, like that one line. We'll save this out, and then all we have to do is take our foreground here, if this will load in the inspector, take our foreground here and reference it to our rect transform, take our overheat float, and reference it to our data. And oh, one more thing we missed. You can see it's working. It's totally working. But I messed up my pivots here. So if you want to take your image and grab your pivot point and put it on one side here, now when you change the width, it'll kind of change, it'll expand from one side, which is nice. So if we leave this at 200 and then play this, you can see our overheat slider here goes up and then slowly decreases, right? And then when you hit the top, now I can't fire for 4 seconds. So it works perfectly. It looks pretty good. And it's all done easy with Mixins. This video ran a little longer than I wanted, but that's fine. Hopefully you guys are as entertained by Mixins as I am, because they're a super great like organizational practice for creating modular code. Try working, like, it doesn't have to be a weapon system. It can be a system that does anything. But if you work with Mixins, it's modular across your whole project, which is great. And I know, like, stuff like check overheat, like, that's not a very modular Mixin. There's not a lot of places you're going to be using something like this. But that's okay. It's okay to just have some chunks of code that are pretty specific. But like trigger animator, like, that's the most modular piece of code I've ever written. Anytime you need to trigger an animation anywhere in your whole project, all you have to do is slap on trigger animator and call it from your check fire, or sorry, your check mix in action function, which is going to be doing other stuff in other places in your project, and it's all just transferable. So I think on my next video, I'm going to do, I might do, like, you can see the inspector is getting pretty messy because there's so many different small classes on it. So I think I'm going to try to write a custom inspector that'll make it look a little nicer, and have it organized nicely in like one component that displays all your mixins. So I think that would be kind of nice if people are interested in that. Other than that, I might, like, right now we have one gun firing one type. I might do like different fire types, or do like an inventory where you can hold different guns. Let me know if you have a preference, if anyone actually watches this, which would be great. But yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.